Good day, friends. Welcome to another Word of God Spirit Contact. And this one has a little bit of a story behind it, and I'll try and sum that up without waffling on, as I have a tendency to do. About 4 or 5 days ago, I had read an article from the Washington Post, basically on the movie Chappaquiddick, which has just been released, and gave some opinions on the quality of the film and how some people represented in the film had reacted to it. As I recall, some of the ladies are represented as young women and colleagues of Mary Jo, and some others. And it just alerted me to the fact that the movie was coming out. I hadn't heard of it at all. Complete news to me for, a self-professed film buff. I was quite surprised. And thought about it and recalled my own investigations. I don't mean psychic investigations. I mean reading a variety of books on political cover-ups and conspiracies that I have here. And while having delved deeply into the research into the JFK and RFK assassinations, I hadn't studied the situation at Chappaquiddick that deeply, although I had read some articles. And same with John Kennedy Jr. Had read some disturbing things on that. The usual, private investigations that turn up evidence that does not jive with the quote-unquote official story. And, I like to go beyond that whole myth of the curse on the Kennedys. One might feel it's a curse. One might feel it's karma from past lives. I remember reading a channeled book quite some years ago, not a well-known one, where one of the Kennedys spoke. It was either John or Bobby, on past life karma from an Irish life of 1,000 years ago, where they were involved in politics and were not nice lads, and they were reaping the karma, this sort of a thing. And my own spirit contact with Jack Kennedy from 2 or 3 years ago. Whereas I recall he spoke about a number of issues, but not the actual political machinations and subterfuge that one circled around his own departure from the planet. Thinking on all these things, I think the next day I was driving home from my morning shift, thinking about my, cafe au lait and relaxation time ahead, when I was presented, as, psychics like me often are, and I mean presented, I wasn't thinking about it, with a sudden vision. And it seemed, the content of the vision was sort of a bit like a family photograph. I say a bit, I don't mean, exactly like that. It was an image of some of the Kennedy clan that are now over there in the paradise worlds of the afterlife. And some of them have been there for quite some time. Teddy had only, has only been there a few years. But still, I'm sure he's adjusted at this point. And in the, the center of the sort of family grouping were Ted and Mary Jo sitting there. And a significant number of other, I'm driving along here, I can't really I didn't pull over and sort of look at it with, spy glasses. But JFK and Jackie were there. And there were definitely others, probably Joe. But, he's no longer a young man. I barely know what Joe looked like as a young man. I just I've seen the odd photograph, but the image is not emblazoned into my mind, unlike Jack and Bobby. We've seen that so often, you know. But the images are emblazoned. And what else? So, as I say, it's sort of a spread out family shot. And I asked Spirit about this. I said, well, what's this? And they said, we'd like you to make a spirit contact with this and publicize it. And so I said, well, is this coming up? And they said, no, it's actually happened. You did this either last night or the night before while you were asleep, but you're not going to remember until we tell you, which we are doing now. And when you do the video on it, it will be a retrospective. And for those of you who are not familiar with WordofGord's spirit contacts, I sometimes do them live, like it's in real time, and other times I'm remembering an out-of-body contact from, the day before or whatever. Usually the night before it happens when you're asleep. But, so there's a variety, in case, as I say, you might be attracted to this because, the headline will say Ted Kennedy and Mary Jo Kopecne. And they're the main players in this one. And so if I don't look like I'm going into a trance here, you'll know why. And even when I do go into a trance, it's very light. I don't sort of disappear into it. I just sort of tune into it. And there's many ways of channeling. Every channeler has their own way of doing it, their own approach, their own style, and I do too. And whatever I do is not in any way to criticize or go against what any other channel may have done or is about to do. For example, my contact with Stephen Hawking a couple of weeks ago was quite different to what others seem to have done. And I didn't watch the others. People emailed me and said, hey, Gord, did you know about this? And whereas I contacted a Stephen Hawking that had just transited and was not adjusted and was coping with the results of his lifelong, certainly interest in the incredible infinity of the galaxies and black holes, etc., he didn't seem to have a concept of what the afterlife would be like. So he was in a very dark place with a lack of knowledge of what he was up to. Whereas other people seem to tune into a Stephen Hawking that could apparently give answers to, profound scientific questions. And my guy was just kind of, like, what am I, who are you, and what's going on? So I suspect that people projected into the future, and in spirit you can do this quite easily. It's a lot of channels don't even realize they're doing it. They project into a desired future, the desired future being the Stephen Hawking that is adjusted and can answer questions, which will happen. I mean, when I did my contact, I knew from talking to Christopher Hitchens several times, as if you do your research, you'll find out I did this, that these people progress. They arrive with all their intellectual prejudices based on scientific materialistic thinking and rejection of what they would call magical thinking or religious mythologizing or fairy tales or whatever they want to, however they, because science does not yet have the instruments to measure the vibrational quality of the afterlife realms. So they deny it. Their instruments can't find it, so therefore, their instruments can find really small particles, teeny weeny little things that are a million times smaller than atoms, and really big stuff way at the other end of the galaxies. Their instruments can do that, but their instruments cannot, as yet, see where the afterlife is or trace it. And there might be a few mavericks that are out there saying, I saw something on Facebook a while ago, scientists, prove the afterlife. I didn't bother reading it because I can't be bothered. I don't give a shit about what scientists think, really, because they're fools. And they're totally dependent on their crutches. Like guys walk around with crutches because they can't walk. Well, scientists walk around with their theories because they can't think. They can't think outside the box. They can't think outside the envelope because they're too scared to be mocked by their fellows or too scared to lose their grant funding, or too scared for a thousand things. They're too scared of it. So it's up to people like me, and it's not just me, there's loads of us, who stand out there in the wind of disrespect and mockery to plunge ahead and make these contacts. And as I've done before, I encourage all of you to do this, to participate in this project by talking to your own dead, your own loved ones that have passed on, whether it's granddad that died 40 years ago, or a brother or a cousin or a good friend that died in a car accident last week. Contact them. It's not that hard. Of course, there's the veil of grief. I get that. But you have to penetrate through that, and you will if you try. It's just telepathy. That's all it is. It's not a big deal. It's not, as they say, it's not rocket science. It's telepathy. Get with the program. Okay, enough of that sloganeering and rhetorical flourishes. Okay, I'm going back to this contact. Again, this is not in real time. This is something that I participated in and did happen in spirit a little while back, a few days ago, when I was there. I'm there a lot, but the whole thing is you don't remember when you wake up unless you focus on it. You remember little bits and twiddles, and then you focus on it and make those little snapshots into little movies. That's what I'm going to do now. Ted and Mary Jo, I see you quite clearly now. And I'm returning to our visit, and I'm letting you know that I'm in more full consciousness than I was when I met you before. And I'm on film, and I will be placing this on the internet very shortly. So please feel free to give forth your message. And the rest of the clan back there, I thank you all for convening like this. I realize it's not for my benefit. I'm just the interviewer. I'm just the guy that's going to carry the message to the world on the internet. But I thank you all for making this effort. And it seems to me that it's your idea. Let's talk to some mediums. Let's show them what a family can be like and what can happen when the dramas and traumas and jealousies and angers and upsets of the earth life are put aside. I understand that. Ted's asking me if I liked the movie. Yes, Ted, I did enjoy the movie. It was a finely tempered production. The script was strong. The acting was good by all concerned. I think even a young person, obviously I'm not a young person, I can remember when it happened. And I believe the scriptwriters were not alive when it happened. They did their research as much as they could. And the reality of 1969 with the moon landing and all that sort of a thing, no internet, a few channels on television and radio and not much else. They captured that. And I believe the fellow that played you did rather well. And Mary Jo, I believe the lady that played you did rather well too. I believe she conveyed that interesting combination of the attractive and intelligent and ambitious young woman dedicating herself to the ideals of democracy as she saw them in the Washington of the day, and being very disappointed and upset and probably full of despair after Bobby's murder. I think it was conveyed rather well. And I hope you feel the same way. And she's saying, I was pleased that I was not portrayed as some sexy young thing out to bag a senator, because I was not. And yes, Mary Jo, I agree. That was they could have taken that very easy step. They could have taken that very easy step, and they turned that one down, and I applaud them for doing so. Mary Jo, I do remember the 60s, and I do remember the idealism of young people, not only in the civil rights movement and the anti-war movement, but also those that entered politics and feeling, and the Peace Corps, feeling that their energy and idealism could help make the world a better place, even only if by small increments. And I do remember the surge of disappointment and despair following not only Jack's murder, but Bobby's too. Bobby's coming so hard on the heels of Martin Luther King certainly packed a punch, no question. So, Mary Jo, you want me to say, yes, I get what you, okay, I hear you. Mary Jo wants me to tell you that basically the basic message is all is forgiven. Whatever, things that she might have been angry about or envious of or felt shortchanged by in the process, or the hurts and angers at being, left to drown, are long gone. And she is full of the joys of heaven and full of the spirit of forgiveness. And as she does this, she's putting her hand on Ted's hand and squeezing it in a, how shall I say, a reassuringly friendly way. It seems very convincing to me. It doesn't feel like any kind of a publicity stunt. And given that many folks, not necessarily the people I'm with right now, can enter and remain in heaven with a good deal of ego and pride, and would wish to put on a publicity stunt, I don't believe that this is it. And okay, what's Teddy saying? Teddy's saying, with our family and the mythology behind our family and the legend of our family and the large role we played in American public and political life for many decades, we understand that this could be seen as just another Kennedy publicity stunt. And we would ask you not to see it that way. That's not how we see it. We're not trying to change things under Mr. Trump's administration or previously under Mr. Obama's administration. We are accepting of all that happens because we understand that everyone comes here just as we do, we have, and have to account for themselves. Maybe not to their maker if they're not religious, but it's certainly to their contemporaries. We all have to account for ourselves. We all have to face those that we have upset and angered and annoyed with their either personal or political directions. I want people to understand he's saying that everyone is here. We're not all squished into the same little corner of heaven, not by any means. But I, for example, have met up with a number of political figures from other countries, not just America. People that I had contact with from Europe and Asia while I was a long-serving senator, as you know. And we discussed things that we maybe didn't see eye to eye on when we were alive. And we also discuss how things could be made better in the contemporary world of the planet. And although we don't never try to force our ideas on people, we know you can't do it anyway. As spirits, we can't do it, but we do try to talk to our colleagues, our contemporary colleagues. I know that I have, and I know that my brother Jack has, talked to the spirit of Obama when he's asleep at night. We have discussed many issues dear to the hearts of Democrats. As you know, Mr. Obama was a strong-willed, strong-minded individual who had his vision of America in the modern world and what role it should play, and he tried to implement that to the best of his abilities. And while we discussed matters with him when he was asleep, we never tried to strong-arm him into anything. And as you well know, he's not a guy that can be strong-armed anyway. So just to give you an idea of how things go. And that's well, thank you, Ted. I understand that, and I hope the audience does too. Okay. I know some of you are going to be shocked at this, but I'm not. There's a lady stepping forward who's a sort of, it's Marilyn Monroe. I know it is. And she's a little more demure than we remember her, but certainly radiant, a radiant, beautiful woman, no question. I say a little more demurely dressed, and that seems to be her choice. And she says, "I know what you're all expecting. I'm not the babe I once was, because I got tired of that. I chose it, but then I got tired of it. And I'd like to tip my hat to all the great ladies acting in Hollywood these days. I really would. You're doing some wonderful work." And she's running off all kinds of names, and I'm not even catching all of them. But Meryl Streep obviously is one. And Judi Dench, ladies whose names I'm now forgetting. Sorry about that. But she's saying it's wonderful how women have come into their own in Hollywood in the last year since I was there. It's wonderful to see you asserting yourselves and making statements and not taking any shit. She just loves that. And she said, "I like it so much I may even come back and be an actress again." Although she says, maybe not right away. What else is she saying? She's saying, "I'd like to repeat that message of forgiveness that Mary Jo gave. Whatever you think happened to me in my later days when I passed, and I'm not going to comment in one way or another. There's no point in stirring the pot and making people angry all over again," she says. All is forgiven. And as she says this, wait a minute, what's she doing? Yeah, again, it's hard they're all so young and beautiful. Gosh, it's hard. I think she's walking over to a seated couple, I'm sure is JFK and Jackie sitting together. And she's standing behind them and putting her arms around them both. Now, isn't that an image for you? Boy, I cried at that movie last night, and I think I'm going to cry again. Think of what that image means. Just think of all the conspiracy theory and all the political anger that came up over Marilyn's death and who was or who was not involved. Oh, gosh. Thank you, Marilyn. And what is she saying? She's standing up again, and Jackie's looking up and smiling at her. Gosh, they're all so young and beautiful. JFK's not saying anything. He's allowing this to unfold without wanting to take center stage or the mic. Not that there is a mic, but you know what I mean. What is Marilyn saying? She said, if we can do this, of course we're in heaven. We understand it's easy to be happy in heaven. We're not faced with having to get up every morning and struggle through the day and face those that would oppose us, as we did when we were alive, and those that would harass us. But we encourage you to be forgiving, is what she's saying, the basic message. That's not the exact words, but she's sort of saying, if we can do this, take this as an inspiration and forgive those around you that you may be angry at and may be envious of or hurt by, And as she says this, what is she? She's wearing a sort of a, every lady's going to be angry at me for not being able to describe this better, but a sort of a loose, I would say a sort of a turquoisey / gray. I know that doesn't sound, a very pale turquoise that's shading into gray, sort of loose sleeved, draped over the shoulders and long, very, very graceful, very, very graceful. And God knows how long she spent deciding on that. And she laughs as I say that. She says, oh, not that long. I got a nice little selection to choose from. Let's see. Yeah, Bobby's there, and I can see him, but he doesn't seem to want to say much. Oh no, he's standing up. He heard me say that. He's standing up, moving in front of the family gathering a little bit. What's he saying? Yes, he's saying even some of the quote unquote mobsters that I chased into obeying the law, and I tried to. They're here, and I talk to them once in a while. I'm getting the name Sam Giancana. He said, we don't exactly see eye to eye. They still have their justifications for their behavior. And, along the lines of, we're just, doing our business and you should have left us alone to do it. Things were worse when you busted us because there was more turmoil and fighting and shooting after you busted us. But he says we do try to discuss matters and how we could maybe make things fairer in society in the future. I was a zealot for law and order, and I recognized that, and I was quite convinced it was the right thing to do. And if I was back on Earth now, I'd be much the same. But I would try to be a little more understanding of those who break the law in a big way. And as I look at the planet now, I see just as many CEOs and bankers breaking the law, thinking that they have complete impunity and a right to do so because the world is so dependent on their activities. And I would say to them, you do not have that right. And, well, Bobby, I certainly agree. But, what can I do? I'm just a psychic sitting here in Southern Ontario doing my best. But he just wanted to give that message. They all seem to, I'm getting this basic feeling from all of them, although, how can do they all agree? I mean, there's got to be many variations in opinion here on the matters before the America now. And he says, we do our best to talk to people when they're asleep and inspire them with great ideals. And some of them will say to us, yes, well, they're great ideals, but it's up to us to implement them. And it's easy for you to say, here, look at this great ideal. Let's do this, let's do that. But down on the earth plane, it's not so easy to implement them. And he says, we understand that, but we still have to try to move on, try to make things better. So, and with that, they're saying, or, I'm getting the message generally. Nobody's actually mouthing this particular message. They're saying, even if you're, or somebody's saying, and I'm getting this, even if you're distraught and upset and depressed at the state of the world, understand that nothing lasts forever, and that you will come here to one or other of the paradise worlds and heaven worlds and be at ease and at peace. It will happen to you. Well, there you go. A not uncommon message for psychics to hear, but certainly that particular assemblage of people was astonishing when I first perceived it in a visionary situation as I was driving home 3 or 4 mornings ago. And as you can see, I'm still quite affected by it now. And I hope I got everything. There was a lot of them there, but they were all smiling and they all seemed very happy. And I hope that fulfills whatever it needs to be fulfilled. And onward and upward we go. Blessings to you all.